again to our Ask the Broncolor Assistant webinar series. If this is your first time, thanks for joining us. If this is your multiple times, thanks for coming back. My name is Blake Griffin. I am the brand manager here for Broncolor USA, and we're going to have a nice little discussion today regarding why Broncolor. But before we get into there, I would like to introduce my partner, as always, who's going to be helping us through this process, Galvin Collins. Galvin Collins is the Broncolor assistant, and he is a photographer and cinematographer working in Portland, Oregon. He has spent more than 13 years splitting his time between a stills assistant and a first assistant camera. As a stills assistant, he has helped bring photographers' visions to life, and as a first AC, he has helped keep the picture sharp. So without further ado, Galvin Collins, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Hope everybody's well. Blake, thank you very much for the introduction, and look forward to talking about why Broncolor.
Of course, as we go on today, I want to let everybody know, of course, that we do have our Q&A session set up here with not only the rest of the Broncolor USA team ready to answer your questions. If you do have any questions, please throw them up there in the chat in that Q&A session, and we will do our best to get in touch and do everything here. We also have a lot of good stuff today planned, so there's a lot of places where we can answer those questions as we go along. So feel free to go ahead and get those going, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, what we're going to start today is we're actually going to talk about one of the big pieces that you will hear over and over and over again when you talk Broncolor with the users that are in the field today, and that's going to be reliability. This is probably one of the bigger things that we hear all of the time as to why people are choosing Broncolor.
Yeah, reliability. So as far as everything goes, for me, when I said a few months back when we were doing our first webinars that I could probably speak a whole hour about why Broncolor, reliability is number one for me. When we were working as, on commercial photo shoots and everything, it's so important that your gear works, that you test it, you know it, and you can work with it and trust it. Because when you have 20 clients on set, some very professional talent, and you are working for a incredibly well-known brand, you have to deliver. And yes, there's a lot that you can do to, if something goes wrong, to make it right, but just knowing that your gear is as dependable, reliable, and you can count on it as much as is humanly possible, that is where Broncolor really shines. It is incredibly durable. It is incredibly accurate, consistent. It's known, and it is fantastic. And in my days of assisting and shooting, I've personally never had a piece of Broncolor equipment break, not function as as advertised or as necessary. It has always been a dependable and known quality, and that's what we expect, and that's what we want from Broncolor. And that's we have a bigger presentation to get on, so I'm not just going to keep hammering reliability and dependability. We've got more to talk about, but that is chiefly amongst everything, is it's going to work when it counts.
Yeah, absolutely, and there are other pieces to that as well. I know that our Swiss team, which I'm seeing in the chat here, are going to get probably a lot of love from what I'm about to say. But when you look at averages, the average life of one of our packs in the world is about 10 years old. So that means that when you are getting into the Broncolor ecosystem, you're making an investment. And it's an investment for good, it's an investment for your work, and it's investment long term, which is something that is very, very, very super important and great to have when you know that you're making that investment in equipment.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people who have, when I was first coming up as an assistant, they had, the Scoros were already out on the market, but they had the older graphite packs and everything, and they work. I know studios that still use them. They are an investment, and they're an investment that works for the long term. It's not short-sighted. They deliver and they work. And I think they're easy to use. They're easy to get going.
There we go. Now I'm seeing in the chat here, and I apologize for my pronunciation, but Doka, I'm assuming that's how the pronunciation here in the chat says. So are you saying that professionals don't need redundancy in case something unpredictable happens? Absolutely not. I am thoroughly of the mindset that 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and that redundancies are there, but what we are saying and how we're bringing things together is more along the lines of, again, knowing that a product is reliable and works. That way, in case something does happen, then, you're hoping that that's not going to be the case. But certainly, no, we're not saying that there's not a need for spares or redundancy in this case.
I second that. The other thing is there's no second there's no second option for. There's no replacement for testing. That is the best. If I think a lot of times with current budgets and timeframes that a lot of people are neglecting the pre-light day or the testing day, or photographers don't take that time before they actually go and do the job to do a test shoot to proof of concept and idea. Luckily, I've got to work with a lot of photographers where we would, generally speaking, a couple weeks before the job, or even if they were still bidding the job, we would do a test shoot with the gear to see if we could, achieve what we are going to set out to on a smaller scale or in a smaller studio, and just really work to make sure everything works. And then the pre-light day / the test day beforehand. I mean, the bigger the shoot you're on, the more you need to absolutely know that your gear is going to perform on the day. You've got to set it up. You've got to test it. You've got to make sure everything's working so that, at the end of the day, you turn everything off. That first thing in the morning, you can turn everything on, test it, and go. And like we were talking about earlier, have your extra pack, have an extra head, have an extra flash tube, all in the box that you will probably not need to pull out. But at the end of the day, if something does go awry, you can swap out packs and, make that work. So.
Yep, absolutely. And Giancarlo here in the chat says, correct. Better to have and not need than need and not have. However, Braun gear is unlike any other. Hashtag just saying. Giancarlo, you're going to see your name come up a little bit later here in the stream as well. So thank you very much for being a great representative for us on the social media side of things and being a great Braun user. So we can harp on the reliability side of things all day, but let's move forward a little bit and let's get to some of the more fun pieces that we're going to be talking about during our presentation here. We're going to move forward to the Broncolor Famous 5. So you might be asking yourself, you might not have heard this term used recently, but the Famous 5, Broncolor calls it a complete toolkit to analyze and understand light through its 5 main characteristics. As we were kind of discussing this earlier this week, I would like to call the Famous 5 not necessarily a toolkit, but call it a vocabulary. Call it a way to discuss light by its characteristics, and not by saying, oh, well, I want this sharper or more. What are, Galvin, what are some of the other terms that you hear on set that are real fun when somebody goes, oh, I want that cleaner,
Well, the nice thing is if you use, and I think what the Famous 5 can really benefit a crew that works together a lot, is you can unify terminology that you share between you. Like you said, it's a vocabulary, it is the language, and speaking the same language as an assistant, as your photographer, can be incredibly helpful. There's a lot of photographers that want to talk about an ethereal lighting effect, and it's wonderful, and they're good buzzwords to sell an idea. But when you're talking to a technician, assistant like myself, I need to know how you want to achieve that. So the Famous 5 group of terms is fantastic to learn, so that you can know and communicate ideas with other artists or with your collaborators.
Absolutely. So what are the Famous 5? So before we get into more detail onto all of this, I want to draw your attention to that nice looking gentleman there on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have watched any of the previous Broncolor webinars that both us and our Swiss team have done, you will definitely recognize Urs there. He is a wonderful gentleman, and we are actually using a lot of his resources today when talking about the Famous Five. So definitely make sure to check out him. And he may even be in the chat today. I think I saw him signed up, but I don't know if he's actually joining us today. But Urs, thank you very much for helping us out and kind of move forward. So what are the Famous Five? Coverage, edge transfer, shadow definition, shadow contrast, and highlights. So let's get a little bit more in depth, and let's start with coverage. Coverage of light tells us how the light is distributed. Is it an even distribution across the board? Is it center weighted, or is your light in one particular piece of your frame? Or is there a graduation behind it? Does the light start brighter on one side and then go to sort of a darker side on the other? Utilizing our image here as an example, you can see that this light is a little bit more center balanced. It's centered in the center of the frame and is lit that way. I believe that the notes from Urs says that this was done with 3 PAR reflectors and focusing things into the middle of the view.
I think coverage is a great way to also describe the effective light that the light is producing, how wide the beam, how narrow, all of the characteristics. Coverage represents just the overall characteristics of how that light functions. And the terminology to represent that is, again, it's a great way of communicating with your team.
Absolutely. So let's move on to edge transfer. So edge transfer gives the idea of how abruptly light ends when it reaches the end of the modifier or the light angle in this case. Depending on which modifiers and which light shapers you're using will define how things come together and how that light transfer happens. Very sharp, so a very clean edge between, or a clean differentiation between highlight and shadow can be achieved by optical snoots and other attachments like that. You have the not quite as sharp, the next side from like our fluter, like the Fresnel spots, or by using like a honeycomb grid on one of our reflectors. Soft definitely can be achieved by soft boxes, paras, umbrellas, and other open reflectors. And then, of course, non-existent. So being lit very broadly and not having that sort of definition between light and shadow can be done by, bare bulbs, balloons, or other reflectors in that way. So let me try this here. You can actually see in our example drawing here. Let's look at that. Oh, there we go. Can I move that? Nope. Here. Trying some new stuff out on the web today. So let's there we go. Let's look at our arrow there, and let's use this as our example. You can actually see that as part of our image here, there is a lot of our nice definition from where light is coming and light is coming out of that modifier. And then, going back to our previous piece as well, let's talk about sort of that nice gradient across our image as well.
So one of the cool things, like this is a great example of, I've talked about when we're talking about soft boxes. A lot of people just like right off the bat, you just point your softbox at your subject, and that direct light is what you use. But what's really fun and a great exercise, if you're looking for doing some testing and some practice, is start turning that softbox one way or the other and really pan it off of the subject and adjusting your exposure, and you'll see that the type of light you get coming from the side of a softbox is different than the direct front panel. And it's a fun technique, and that shows your edge transfer of how it goes from it's brighter in the center as it fades off, as it gradiates away. And learning how that works, you can use that as a tool or a technique in lighting as well. Absolutely.
So that also now brings up to our next of the famous five, shadow definition. Shadows of hard light. So again, if we're talking hard light, we're going to be talking more of a a bare bulb or one of like our sunlight kits, for example, or even like our P70 reflector or any sort of open grid or open reflector without a grid. Shadows of those hard lights are very quite defined. Even smaller objects, every object's going to cast a shadow, and so even on the smallest of objects, you've got that. When you look at more broader sides of light, as you're softening those through softbox or other diffused, you're going to see that definition, that moment between shadow and highlight, kind of becomes more fused and less discernible in this case.
So shadow definition is a fun exercise as well. And if you want to look for a challenge that is, I think it's great to practice, but try to get the sharpest and most crisp shadow on a background. So put your subject in front of it and then have your shadow cast on the back. Like in the situation that we're right now, you can see how soft the shadow is because I'm using very flattering light and very soft shadows, but try to crisp that up. What techniques will you use? Broncolor even makes a sunlight kit to enhance that effect. And essentially it is a very narrow flash tube that you place in your strobe head, and it creates the smallest point of light, which will produce the crispest sun-like shadow, like a high noon sun shadow effect. But that's a fun exercise. Practice getting that really crisp shadow. And there's a couple of techniques outside of the kit that you can work with as well that we can talk about sometime there.
Absolutely. So let's move also then now to shadow contrast. A lot of times when you think of highlight versus shadow, light versus dark, you kind of imagine that to be sort of a true black or a lack of detail. Well, that's not always going to be the case. Depending on your working environment, your shadows of your image may still be, pretty well lit. I mean, if you look at your histogram, you may see those as well. And looking at the example here, this side of the talent of the model of the subject here would be considered your shadow edge as well. But there is a difference between, of course, that shadow and shadow here. And these pieces can sort of mean the same as you're looking at things, depending on your environment, depending on the light shaper that you're using, depends wholly on shadow contrast. Now, of course, depending on what your idea is for your finest or your final image, you may want to light something more moody, for example, which you might want to increase that contrast. You might want to light in such a way where less of your talent is lit in this case. So the bigger other piece to remember here is that shadow definition, so that what we were talking about before, the hardness of that piece between highlight and shadow, has nothing to do with shadow contrast. They are two different pieces and work in two different ways.
I think one thing to note here as well, when we're talking about Broncolor products and quality, all the Broncolor strobe packs operate in 1/10 of a stop incrementation. So you really have the ability to dial in and fine tune your lighting. You're not stuck to thirds or halves or even wholes, as some products have been. It's becoming more and more commonplace, but Broncolor has probably the best accuracy of 1/10 of a stop. So when you're on set and you're working with a client and they are specific about not wanting the deepest shadows, so they have more editability in post, you can really dial in and find that spot that works best for the image and for the client's deliverables, and that 1/10 of a stop incrementation. Sometimes it is just a 1/10 of a stop to get that shadow detail brought up, or 2/10. It's just great to be able to, quickly find those values.
And then finally, let's talk highlights. This is a term that I have been using throughout, discussing the famous five here. And what we can say here is that, generally speaking, when you say highlights and you're using a hard light shaping modifier, that light area, the highlights are completely burnt or blown, I guess is another way that you can kind of, look at that and say. Utilizing our example photo here, if you see right next to where I'm drawing my lines on this image, you can see that the highlights of these reflective silver pieces, they're almost completely white. There's no data left in them, and there's nothing that you can kind of recover from this in this case. The other pieces to kind of look at is that, let's see here, considering, for example, using a larger octabox and you're photographing a person, you can getting catch lights in eyes, pieces of that, pieces like that. I like this last portion here as well, that the brightness of highlights give you additional information about the distance to the light from your object or model. When your light shaper is further away, that highlight is brighter. I really like how that is a nice way of discussing and describing that that functionality of light.
What's also good is the talking about this too, like, so you mentioned earlier using an octabox to light a portrait, and you can see that in your subject's eyes. What I kind of find myself doing while I'm out in the world, say shopping, is you'll oftentimes still see advertising photography that's printed very, very large for, in-store displays and demos. And you can oftentimes in the print see in the subject's eyes how they lit the shot, which I find kind of edifying and kind of fun to see, because you can sometimes decode what they're using. Are they using a para, an octa, a square box? And these are all things that are pretty fun too. That it can teach you while you're out in the world what others are doing. Which is good to give you something to try if you're looking for some inspiration in the studio later on.
Absolutely. So I guess that is going to kind of wrap up our discussion of the famous five. Are there any questions that have kind of popped up during this portion here that we can answer before we move forward?
Let's see. Let's see if one of our folks who've been tending the chat want to let us know. We've both been presenting pretty paying attention here. So let's see.
Yep. I think so far, it looks like there is some conversation here, but we can kind of continue on and go from there. I mean, again, if we have any specific questions, let us know, and let's go from there. So we're going to move on to the next piece of this. And, of course, Galvin and I can talk for hours and days about Broncolor as a whole, as users and lovers of the system. But let's go a step further and say, what do other Broncolor users think? So we sent this information out to a lot of photographers that we've been working with in the field and to our team on social media, asking sort of, to use a turn of phrase, don't take my word for it. Let's see what what everybody else thinks. So we prepared a nice little video here that asks that question and kind of gets us some nice answers. If you do follow us on YouTube and you have been looking at some of the content that we've been creating, you may recognize some of these people, and you might recognize some people for some videos that are coming up in the future. So definitely keep your eyes out and let's enjoy that.
Yes, my name is Ryan Beck, and I am located in Rancho Cucamonga, California, which is about 40 miles east of Los Angeles. I'm a commercial photographer, pretty much specializing in product and food, and I've been doing this since 1991, so a long time. So yeah, over my 30 years of experience, I've used other brands' lighting equipment, and I always strove to get to the Broncolor level for the flash consistency, for color temperature, for rock solid reliability. Other manufacturers, for example, I would get to a point in the photo shoot and they'd say, oh, we got to do an action shot of shrimp in a pan, flying up in the air. With other brands, I would be like, oh, shoot, I've got to do my flash sync now as an issue, or, that is the flash duration going to be fast enough? And the answer was always no. With Broncolor, I could simply go into that, no problem, here we go, and getting these beautiful stop motion shots without even thinking about it. So that's probably been the most beneficial. It's good for everything. I've used one of my favorite is this para here in back. It's great for portraiture. It's great for food photography. It's great for industrial photography. there's so much use to that you can get out of just one light with because it's a parabolic and you can move the light inside. It's a phenomenal tool to use.
My name is Maren Caruso, and I'm a photographer. I studied fine art, but always gravitated to photography. For me, if ever I had a question about how something worked, I didn't like going and renting awkward equipment every time I needed to discover something or try and, troubleshoot. So I would accumulate gear as I could afford it. And so at a certain point, I was able to invest in a lighting gear, and I wanted, I tested a bunch of different types of lights, and the one system that I chose was Broncolor, just because it had so much flexibility of like the amount of power that you can dial incrementally by tenths, to be able to just dial something down 2/10 of a stop, and having that control was a beautiful thing, as well as freezing motion. So I did a bunch of tests with different lighting systems, and Bron seemed to just be the one that really stand out, that would just freeze my motion. And so if I was doing a shoot and I thought, oh, I'd love to be able to, stop all those droplets in the air. Oh no, I have to go rent that special pack for that one shot. I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted one lighting system that just kind of did it all. So I put down and invested in Broncolor, and I've been super happy.
Prior to being with Broncolor, I was with a competitor. I just didn't quite get the quality of light that I was looking for. It wasn't consistent. There was just some issues in terms of the connectivity. There was a lot of things that were breaking down earlier than they necessarily should have, and that just very much slowed me down. For me, the lights are something that I use as my tool, but the last thing that I want to be doing is worrying about them in the middle of a shoot. The process had to be such that I don't have to worry about the lights. So that was one of the main reasons for me to make the switch to Broncolor.
I switched to Broncolor after I had a major disaster on the shoot. I had a fashion shoot down in Manhattan on a rooftop, and it was very hot, and my lights were causing me so many issues. I had completely inconsistent firing. The lights wouldn't pop at the time, and then I couldn't figure out how to trigger it, because it was like everything was okay, but it was not working. And the bottom line, the problem was extreme heat that I had outside. And that's when I said enough, and I moved to Broncolor. And since that time, I never had any issues, whether it's hot or too cold, or whether I'm in a congested area with a lot of Wi-Fi's around. My lights simply work, and I don't have any issues. And that's what I need in my business, reliability, because when my customer is watching me, the last thing I want is to worry about my equipment. Broncolor is the only company that has all the precision lighting that I need. After doing a huge research and working with many different brands, the only light that gives me so many options with its modifiers, and also ability to control the temperature of the light, to get the maximum power, and to get all the needed modifiers that I need, the Broncolor was the only option. So
I chose Broncolor first and foremost for speed. Flash duration was the most important thing for me, because I shot a lot of liquids and splashes and pours. Motion is what I needed to capture. After that, I really fell in love with the quality of the light. The packs are amazing, the accessories, everything about Broncolor.
The things that drew me to Broncolor were, number one, the level of consistency with the lights. Two was the Broncolor Control app. It's very seamless, and it allows a person who doesn't know anything about lighting to come in and use it. And the third is the wide assortment of modifiers that allow me to do all types of jobs.
All right, perfect. And so of course, we've worked with professionals, all through multiple fields in this case, and we definitely do thank everyone who took the time to sit down with us, and we'll hopefully be releasing some more of those videos soon.
All right.
So yes, of course, we've got the ability. We've spoken with a bunch of users. We like a lot of their pieces. Now is sort of another great time before we get into the next pieces. Let's talk questions. Do we have any additional questions that have come through? So one of the pieces, Galvin, that we want to talk more about, some questions that have come in, is talking about sort of the cost of Broncolor versus the investment that you're making. we're talking about here, let's see that there's sort of the idea that Broncolor costs more than a lot of other brands. So having redundancy but rarely using it, there might be some other options there. What are some pros and cons when it comes to making that investment when it comes for the cost of Broncolor equipment?
Yeah. So, I think it's something that when you represent and work with Broncolor, you hear the cost issue or the cost comment come up a lot. And, for the most part, we like to talk more about the quality of the lights and everything like that. But I think it's worth mentioning, as the question has come up in the chat. First off, again, dependability for me and in the jobs and the work that I've done, you get hired time and time again because of your reliability and somewhat the guarantee that you can get the job done. That's secondary to, of course, people will want to work with a photographer because of their art, because of their portfolio, but then they will get hired and rehired and they'll be known because of their dependability. I mean, back in the days of film, you didn't see the results from the shoot until until the film is developed and then it's been edited that way. But with digital, I think some of that has slipped a little bit. And since you can see it on set, you know what's going on, you can make live changes, but it is still imperative. And depending on the job, the reliability factor ends up being super clutch. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with some very big brands and some very big talent, and their time, if you have one light go down and you have a professional athlete that you're working with and you have them for, I mean, we've had people walk in, say, here is your talent. They shake hands. They go, you have 12 minutes to photograph everything. And I've got a shot list that's about 20 shots long with requirements. And then what, the added stuff that you want to get. And it's basically, if in 12 minutes that we're working with that athlete, for some reason, that light goes down, then and you're sitting there angling trying to fix it, you're eating away at the time that you get, and you won't get that back. Most of the time you have these athletes for that 15 minutes, have a full day of schedule and you won't get them back. So that's where in my mind, having the most reliable, the most dependable, the most consistent lighting, again, we're building our portfolios, we're building what we know, and we're constantly educating as we go. Being able to recreate something that we've done based on a client request, or you get a job to do the same thing but with different products, knowing that you can set up the same tools and get ballparks, not just ballparks, but you can get the same exact levels, consistency and everything, and recreate a shoot. I mean, that's clutch. And then, if you shoot 10 shots at the same settings, that everything is going to be the same across the board. You're not getting variability. I mean, it just comes down to the tool that you want to use. If for you, the potential for something going down because it's a more economical option, if that's an option for you or something that you are prepared to deal with, I mean, you can. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on set and go, I'm sorry, my light isn't working. Let me set up another one. I'm sorry that we are losing you. So that it just comes down to stuff like that. And we could go on and on about it, but the reliability and the consistency is really clutch, especially when you're dealing with clients that you want to work with again. It could be the difference between you getting that next call for that job next week, doing something similar but different for the same clients, or it's having to hit the pavement with the portfolio again and find another client because you had something go down. And I know it sounds superficial and stupid that somebody wouldn't hire you again, but it's that professionalism. It's that delivering on the promise of creating the photography that you've been hired to do.
Absolutely. Giancarlo in the chat says, at Galvin Collins, nailed it. Time equals money. You need efficient and reliability. So absolutely, we're right on. For lack of a better term, we're right on the money when it comes to talking about that. So I think everything else looks like all the other questions we've got are currently being worked on. So let's move to our next slide and keep everything rolling here. So of course, as I mentioned before our video, we reached out to our social media community at large and asked the question, why do you use Broncolor? And these are some of the pieces that we got. These are the voice of the people themselves. Aaron Van Photo. I chose Broncolor for the wide range of unique modifiers and for backwards compatibility, knowing that the investment I make today, again, that word investment, will continue to work for many years to come as a great comfort. So that's always great to hear. Craig Capture, I love the lighting consistency from shot to shot. Galvin was talking about that earlier in our presentation as well, that when you're working with Broncolor equipment, you know that if you're capturing 2, 5, 10, 100 shots at a time, that you're going to have that same consistency from shot to shot. And of course, if you're getting a better image in camera, you're spending less time in post-production. And of course, that's saving money as well. We'll go.
You see the word investment brought up a lot here, which I think is a great way to think about it. There's the whole thing that I was mentioning about the reliability and that, but that's longevity over time as well. So if you do buy a Scoropack, a Ceros mono head, any of these things, you are really investing in what you are able to provide for clients. And, you don't need to have 30 of these sitting in your garage. There's always rental houses, but, it's an investment in your art. It's an investment in your work. And that's a great way to think about it because, the average age of product going into repair at Broncolor is 8 years old. And, the average age of product in the field is 10 years, you said. I mean, think about that cost spread over 10 years. That piece of equipment has lasted and is performing at the peak of its abilities through that time frame. So anyway, I just a little added bit to my spiel earlier.
Exactly. So you could see Dan Jackson there. I have a set of Broncolor mono heads from the mid 80s. They still run, and I've never replaced a flash tube or modeling light. Now I can't say that that's going to be everybody and everybody's experience, but definitely you can see that the equipment that is still out into the world is still running great. So again, talking investment, you're right there on the money. Giancarlo, I told you as well that you would be coming up a little bit later here in the chat. Simply put, Broncolor offers the most premium quality of light, reliability, and innovation. I've been using Bron gear for nearly 8 years now, both in my studio and on location. So, see, there you go. You're working across everything here. Working with Broncolor for over 35 years, reliable, durable, and consistent color temperature. Simply put, it's the best you can get with an attractive design. So, definitely these are things that we're kind of working with, and that you're seeing a lot of the same comments that are kind of coming up around. Neil in the chat says Broncolor is the only brand that works with equipment from 40 years ago, and really incredible. So, again, we can't really say enough through the pieces here. We got one more slide here from social media. Oh, speak of the devil, there is Neil right there. Strength of the mount, the quality of light, and the long life of flash equipment. So definitely, hey, I'm blown away that we've got such a great media following that enjoys coming into our chat and talking with everybody as well. So it's the product speaks for itself. I can't really say much better than that.
It's rewarding.
Absolutely. So I think that's kind of coming to the end of our presentation today as to why Broncolor. I guess, to sort of sum it up, you're looking at, when you consider purchasing any equipment from any manufacturer and anything that you're working with, you're looking at an investment. And that investment is something that you can only consider for yourself. And you will need to sort of weigh out the pros and cons of to what you are doing and what's going to work best for your workflow, for your needs, both today, tomorrow, and in the future. And a lot of the reliability, a lot of the consistency, and just the overall usability are all things that you need to really consider before you make that purchase. And Broncolor, as a brand, as a company, that is definitely something that we strive to be the best in every category that we possibly can be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are there any last questions, or are we caught up on questions?
I think we're kind of caught up here. So what I can say is that if you do want to learn a little bit more about what we're talking today, or if you want to join in on the conversation, please make sure to give us a like and a follow. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Broncolor USA. We also have our Broncolor USA YouTube page, which we just recently opened up last year, and we want to make sure that you are subscribed to see the new content that's coming out. And be sure to check out broncolor.us as well, where we're going to continually be putting out new blog posts, new product announcements as things happen. That's going to be your best place to take a look for everybody. So definitely, thank you so much again for joining us today. We definitely appreciate you being here. And I guess the next and sort of final piece that we have, you're very welcome, Giancarlo. Thanks for the presentation. Solid presentation. Hashtag Team Broncolor. There we go.
Love it.
So our next webinar, Wednesday, February the 16th at the same time that we had before, we're going to be discussing the Pico light and its accessories, one of Broncolor's more specialty lights that does a wonderful bunch of stuff on a very small form factor in terms of being able to control and light items. So come on back. We want to happily see you there. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.